Welcome everyone. My name is Dimitri Broxton and welcome to In the Artist Studio. We're just gonna let folks sign in. So we'll give a few minutes, and while you do that, we always start off by asking in the chat where you're joining us from. If you are joining us on Facebook, which I know a lot of people like to do each week, please, if you wanna interact with us, I invite you to please visit MOAD's website. So you can click it, the registration will seriously take you like 5 seconds, and then you can join us directly on Zoom, and that way you can directly interact with Adebunmi and myself. Oh shoot, that's not what I wanted to do. It's all good.
Silver Spring, Brooklyn. Aw. Pam Morgan.
I can hear you are in the city.
I know.
I love it.
Right off like one of the busiest intersections in Jersey.
All right, so folks are still coming in, but I'm gonna go ahead and get us started because we have so much to cover today. Thank you again so much for being here. So everyone, I'm actually gonna read a few statements as well as Adebunmi's bio before we get started. Thank you again for joining us. I love seeing all of these familiar names on the Zoom with us. And then I also see folks signed in on Facebook. Thank you so much for coming and joining us every single week. So this is In the Artist Studio. While MOAD's building may be closed due to the mandatory shelter in place, you can still get your fill of art and artists of the African diaspora. Thank you for joining us every single Wednesday at 1:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4:00 p.m. Eastern, as we visit with some of our favorite artists in their studios to see what they're currently working on. It's a rare opportunity to hear directly from artists in their studios, and we always follow with an audience Q&A. So if you're joining us by Zoom, you'll see there's a Q&A box as we talk and questions come up for you. I invite you to write those into that box, and we will definitely get to them in the last 15 minutes. Please visit our website to see which artists we have coming up, and you can also visit Museum of the African Diaspora on YouTube to see all of the past talks. This series was made possible by generous donations by the Westridge Foundation, MOAD members, and viewers like all of you. Thank you so much. Today's talk is also co-presented with Claire Oliver Gallery in Harlem, New York. So I'm gonna read a few statements. MOAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, and so many others who have lost their lives at the hands of police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. Even in the physical space, we also like to start off with a land acknowledgement. So as many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those who were forcefully brought to this continent, our institutions were founded upon exclusions and erasures of the indigenous people whose lands we are located. With deep respect, MOAD acknowledges that even in the virtual space, our people, our work, and even our network servers are on native lands, and we thank the indigenous people of the Bay Area who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Now, my amazing guest today. Adebunmi Gbadebo is a visual artist who creates sculptures, paintings, prints, and paper using human hair sourced from people of the African diaspora. Rejecting traditional art materials, Gbadebo saw hair as a means to center her people and their stories essential to the narratives in her work. Born in New Jersey and based in Newark, Gbadebo first gained recognition in 2015, exhibiting in her first solo exhibition at the Paul Robeson Gallery at Rutgers University, Newark, New Jersey, while also earning her BFA at the School of Visual Arts in New York. Her exhibitions include Dhaka Art Summit in Bangladesh, 154 Contemporary African Art Fair in London, Minneapolis Institute of Art in Minneapolis, Untitled Art Fair in Miami, Chashama, you have to help me with that one, Miranda Kuo Gallery, the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center in New York, Morris Art Dodge Foundation, College of St. Elizabeth, New Jersey, amongst others. She is in the permanent collection at the Minneapolis Institute of Art and Minnesota Museum of American Art, and has been written about in publications such as the New York Times, the Huffington Post, the Sydney Morning Herald, Artspace, Ocula, and Afropunk. Gbadebo's residencies include Vermont Studio Center, Keating Foundry, and in 2017, she gave a talk at the Newark Museum speaking on the connections between Mickalene Thomas's documentary, Happy Birthday to a Beautiful Woman, A Portrait of My Mother, and how her own mother has influenced her work professionally and personally. Adebunmi is currently represented by Claire Oliver Gallery in Harlem, New York. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really feel honored to be here.
Yeah, and I also, as I just love to do, I want to start us off with a super duper short video for people who don't know your work. I just think it's a really quick fast forward way for people to catch up to speed, sort of. So let's just 1 second here. There we go.
Since we started, we've been championing women. We're sort of dancing along a line between well-crafted, well-executed, beautiful work and very impactful, high-content work.
These paperworks are made using the traditional kuching method of paper making, and they start with the black hair, pulp, and cotton, and the works become sort of like a living document encoded with the DNA, history, culture of the people that I'm interested in depicting in my work.
I'm using fibers as a way of narrative storytelling, and you're seeing photos of African Americans translated into actually bits of cloth that our ancestors wore.
Yeah. That also included a little snippet of both Claire and Bisa, who we spoke to maybe a couple months ago at this point. So yeah, I think it's just nice to give people like a really quick snippet of what you do.
Yeah, and that was my first show at the gallery at 154.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. What an incredible first experience with them is to go all the way to London. That's incredible. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I just got food in before this talk, so my belly's full and I'm ready.
Awesome. Awesome. So I always love to, before we start breaking down into looking at your work, and I'm so excited that we get to actually join you in your studio and see works behind you right now. Part of me is just like, let's just go right into it. But, it's always just really interesting to know. I mean, I think a lot of the folks who join us are not artists themselves. And I hope there's a lot of up and coming artists or folks who want to be artists. So I always love to find out from the folks that I speak with, what got you started in art, and what was that magical moment, if there was one, where you were like, this is the path for me. I really want to be an artist.
Yeah. Well, luckily I had a mom who, I don't know, just kind of started me with art at a very young age. So I took my first art class at the age of 3.
Wow.
At the Newark Museum, and we were talking the Newark Museum of Art, it's now formally called. And back in, when I was going to those classes in the 90s, they had free art classes for toddlers and their parents. And my mom had us both in those classes. And my mom would make art with me. And she pursued like a professional career as an attorney, but she was really artistic. So just seeing her create, and my mom made sure that I was always exposed to Black culture, Black authors, Black poets. And I was reflecting on this. I'm in the city, as you can hear. Yeah, I'm in Newark now. My mom, I was reflecting on this earlier, like how a lot of my work, even now that I'm doing now, is referencing like artists and poets and authors. But I think it was when I got to high school and, there's all that talk like, where are you going to go to college? Where are you gonna And although I started running track at the age of 7, um, but art and track or art and athletics was always a consistent in my life. And I actually had a conversation with a track coach who was like, why do you think you're here? What is your purpose? And I knew it wasn't through track. And, I applied to go to School of Visual Arts after going to 2 universities, a community college in Maryland, and then New Jersey Institute of Technology. I transferred to the School of Visual Arts, and that's kind of how, the art career started rolling. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. I feel like I'm always hearing stories about parents who nurture their children at an early age to pursue the arts, and 3 is incredible. And then also, a common thread that I've been hearing from artists is having that one teacher or that other adult confidant that's like, hey, this is, this is where I see you. Where do you see yourself? That's incredible.
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
Oh, and like beyond like going to the Newark Museum, my mom, there was a art teacher in our community. Her name is Evelyn Graves, and now she works. She teaches classes at a local gallery in Maplewood where I grew up. But she used to teach art classes in her basement to young kids, and I was one of those kids. And I think every single Wednesday for maybe like 7 years straight, I went to her basement and learned art. So she had like a major influence. So it was like private training. It was like, public art programs in the community. It was art in school. So it was like a well-rounded exposure of art. And that's just always been a part of my life.
That is really incredible. And and so many parents, don't encourage their child to pursue art because they're like, you're never gonna make money, you're gonna stay under my roof if you're an artist. So I am finding that the artists that are the most successful with their careers as artists, that they had that encouragement, from the beginning.
And I was really grateful that my mom saw it to be a natural kind of progression to go to art school. Like you said, there is a fear, like, can this be a sustainable, career? Can you make money from this? There's always people to learn how to paint well,
Exactly.
But I think because it started so early in my life, it just made sense, and my mom was really adamant about when you see something in your child. And me, I was her only child, to nurture it. So that was great.
That's so amazing. I just want to jump right in, and just talk about Black hair, because that is so central to the work that you create. It's so central. I mean, you've got this amazing hairstyle for us today. So obviously, hair, and particularly Black hair, is something of significance to you. And so I'm also really interested in I know that there was no class that you possibly took where they were like, we're going to play with hair today, and that's going to be the main medium of the class. I'm sure you took drawing and painting and all these traditional classes. So how did you go from there to hair as your primary medium?
Yeah, I always say going to SBA, it was a really challenging experience, but I believe it's like it is the reason why I'm doing the work I am. And like you said, yeah, I was taking traditional, well, one reason why I went to SVA is because they don't have a concentration. And
Okay.
you're not painting, drawing, photography, you're just fine arts. So I was taking metalworking, sculpture, soft sculpture, electronics, bronze casting. I was all over the place. But then my core classes were, like art history. And this kind of shift in my work from using, because I am a trained painter and like trained in using like clay and traditional art materials. But I was in a art history class. And part of the challenge in going to SVA, my graduating class, I was the only Black person. And I mean like, not the classroom, the graduating class.
Wow, are you serious?
And we had the largest class that year, my year, not even a Black professor. So, I'm the Black kid, this art history class, and this is part 2. So by this time we had a full semester of learning about a white painter, a white painter, a white painter, a white sculptor, a white painter, a white sculptor. And it was the first work that my professor presented in a slide that had a Black figure in it. And this painting was Olympia by Edward Manet. And I was just like, a Black person, and he describes this painting as like it was controversial at its time when it was presented. And I was like, it has to be because of this Black woman. Like that's the only thing radically different from all these paintings before it that we've seen. And what was radical about it was the white woman in it, that she was a prostitute and she has her hand on her crotch and she's looking at the viewer directly in the eye. And like, how dare you have this woman be confrontational in this way? And my professor gave more emphasis about the Black cat in the painting than the Black woman.
Wow.
More about the lace than the Black woman. And because that painting was referencing a painting that came about 200 years before, it was really apparent to me in that moment how, one, our absence in this history, two, how even when we are in the work, we are still ignored, and three, how paintings are always or will always be analyzed within this history. This painting was referencing the one that came 200 years before it because it was a reclining nude. So even if I were to, like, as a painter, paint a Black figure, we would still analyze this Black woman within the context of all the white paintings that came before it. So in that kind of, that moment in my art history class, I made a decision that not only do I not want to add to this narrative, add to this history, but I didn't want to even use that history's material.
Wow.
Because to use paint, even if I were to paint this narrative seeped in this Black subjectivity, it would still be analyzed within this history that has excluded us. So for me, Black hair became, because, our history is in our hair, it is our DNA. There's power that like a single strand could connect us to the continent of Africa. So, once I started thinking about hair as a material, it was like, yeah, this is going to be it. Like our hair is so connected to us culturally, spiritually, financially.
That's true.
All these historically, genetically. And I only use human hair. That because it's really important that all the works I make literally have our ancestry embedded within it. So yeah, I get a lot of hair.
I love it. I love it. The bag of hair.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Now, I know you've answered this question many, many times, and I even saw you answer this question in Nigeria, which just, I love that. I absolutely love that. I have Nigerians in my family, and my family's also from the American South. So there's this thread about hair, and the powers within your hair that just goes back so long. I know it goes back to West Africa. Where do you get your hair from?
So I guess it's always been the same kind of main two processes of how I get the hair. So one, and social media becomes a really essential part of my practice, because I'll put out like call for hair post, or a lot of people will discover learn about my work through Instagram or Facebook, and they'll message me. So I'll either get like a donation that starts off through a DM or email. And if they're close, we'll meet in person, or they'll come to my studio, or they'll mail it. So kind of this back wall behind me with all these like squares that are kind of hard to identify. Those are Ziploc bags and envelopes from hair that's been mailed to me and sent to me from all over. The other way I get hair is going directly to the source, to the barbershop.
Okay.
They'll never run out of hair. So I have like a couple of barbershops, always focusing on like Black or Afro-Latino communities. And I have garbage cans that I keep in those spaces once they agree that they'll partner with me in this way. And throughout the week, they'll sweep up the hair, throw it in that specific garbage can. I come in, grab the bag, and take it back to my studio.
That's awesome.
And kind of the interesting thing about that process is like the barbershop, the hair becomes sort of anonymous, right? So I don't know everyone who's there daily. My relationship is with the barber. So when I make works with the hair from the barbershop, I'm thinking about that space collectively, culturally, what it means to the community, thinking like a lot about the textures, the colors. And then a lot of my donations, although men donate as well, but they're predominantly women, because, women, when they're in the process, they have shed hair, trimmed hair, that's the hair they're giving to me. So how I approach the work is different, whether it's a donation or me sourcing directly.
That's incredible. It's really great to see that the hair kind of sorted in the back. Do you sort it by the texture, by the color? Like how do you go about that in deciding which hair to use as you're working? And also to that, like, is it different? Like, I know as if I go to paint, if I use one brand of paint, it's gonna feel different than another. Are you finding that with hair? Like, I'm so interested, or is it all pretty similar?
Well, no, it does. I do think of like every texture, every color as if it's a different paint color, right? So like, like this is my god sister's mother's, locks. So what I could do with this locks is a lot different than what I could do with, like say this hair. And even within this hair, like this becomes almost like a new material because of its color. And then, this is redder. I have like hair like falling on my lap now. But the different texture allows me to do certain things. So where a kinkier hair may be easier to sculpt with, where a looser curl pattern I have to deal with it in a different way. So depending on the color, the texture, whether it's locked, whether it's short, whether it's long, they all kind of inform the work. It's like having different materials.
Mm-hmm. Now, as your background, did you ever do like style people's hair? We've spoken to a couple other artists at the museum. So a couple months ago, I spoke with Shaniqua Brooks, who's based in Chicago, and then we've shown Angela Hennessy's work. And you know, for you, when you were talking about it, it doesn't seem like you necessarily grew up in the beauty shop and kind of had that connection. Did you always do hair or
Well,
kind
I
of
don't
play
know
with
how
hair?
to cornrow, which is like I can't even make a cornrow. I could braid like a box braid, but I really do use the hair as art material. Like I feel
Okay.
like it already references, you know, it is here. So the things that I implement or how I shape it is really more informed by different histories. Right now, I've been thinking a lot about land, my relationship to this land, meaning my relationship to this country, kind of how our relationship with the land or our body kind of transforms. So I guess the work is more informed by these ideas. You know, right now I'm thinking a lot about land. So the hair is in that conversation. But I think in addition, because it is Black hair, because of how I got it, you know, because of, you know, what it represents, it's innately going to talk about these other things. And that's also why I predominantly work in abstraction.
Okay.
To me, like Black hair is political, you know, Black hair is loaded, you know, it's interesting when you take a line and make it curly, it becomes politicized, right? If we think about, you know, the context of art. So I don't need to make kind of these literal kind of gestures or forms. Abstraction kind of gives me room to layer ideas, to talk about a multitude of things. And then in addition, you know it's Black hair. Like when you see the work, you know that you're looking at us, you know. So that's already in there. And then literally Black hair has information in it. And I like to feel that I use that as like that becomes a material. DNA becomes a material. But so
That's incredible. I love it. I love it. Yeah, I love how you're thinking primarily of it as an artistic tool and incorporating sculptural elements and abstraction in that. I think that's something that really sets you apart from any other artists. And kind of on that note, I think we should dive in and start looking at some of this work. I primarily am going to focus on the images that you shared with me because you're the best curator of your work that there could possibly be. So let's see, get this in the middle of the screen. Let's see. Let's just get past that one. All right.
Yeah, I have that work in the hall, not hanging. But yeah, that piece is called Am I Still Dreadful? And that was kind of an early piece. I started working with hair in 2015. I think that was in 2015. But this is an example, I guess, of a piece where the hair informed the process informed the title, like everything was connected. So this hair belonged to my track coach growing up,
No way.
Yeah, Andrea Johnson. And for most of my life, well, you know, yeah, most of my life, her hair was in locks. And she said she was giving me her hair, so I'm expecting like, oh, I'm gonna get a bag of locks. And I got a bag of loose hair. So what she did, she combed out her locks over 3 months. And all the hair she gave me was all the shed hair from that process. So I was thinking a lot about what the hair used to be, you know, locks, and what it is now, this loose form. And so I felted the hair back together, and it kind of takes on this other kind of locked form, this abstracted locked form. And the piece is saying, well, am I still dreadful? Kind of posing the question, now that I'm in this locked form again, do you see me as dreadful? Which speaks to the history of why we call hair like this dreadlocks in this country. You know, when Africans were brought here through the Middle Passage, their hair would mat, or just the conditions of slavery, not having time to maintain our hair. If our hair would mat, the slave masters would say, look at their dreadful hair. And that kind of started this language of calling, you know, dreadlocks. So that kind of piece is referencing that history, and just what you know, Coach Johnson did with her hair, you know, by taking locked hair and unlocking it, really kind of informed everything else.
So was this while you were in art school that you created this piece?
Yeah, I made that piece while at SBA.
And so this was kind of your first foray. So was this in the context of a class, and it's like, boom, here we go? Like, how did that whole thing come about? Because I mean, that just seems so revolutionary in itself.
So like when I actually made that decision to use black hair, I still had other mandatory classes that had nothing to do with what I could do with the hair. So I think I made that decision early junior year, and the entire junior year, I just collected hair. I didn't know what I was gonna do with it, but I collected hair from neighbors, from barbershops. The first barbershop I went to, Razor Sharp Barber Lounge in Maplewood, they were my first kind of donors. And I did a lot of research. It was really important to me that the work was informed by a real history of our relationship with our hair pre slavery. So I found this book called Hair Story, Untangling the Roots of Hair in America. And that book starts in Africa, and it kind of talks about our long relationship with our hair from that point. And I remember, like, at the end of my junior year, when I had to show my work, I had just bags of hair, and my teachers were like, you're taking electronics? You know, like, how does this relate to the classes you have? But I knew going into my senior year that my senior thesis was gonna revolve around Black hair. And I started my junior year with trying to inform myself and just collecting enough material. And so there was, you know, a lot of the first pieces are informed by like this history of our relationship with our hair.
It's incredible. I threw in a sneak image in here because it blows my mind. So high top. And for me also, this is an earlier work as well, right? 2017, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I well, first of all, I love seeing the barber clippers below. But you know, I think you're in the first piece, we really see it looks like hair directly from someone's head, like it could have just been cut directly off, and you see the human element in there. And for this one, it's like you're really going into this sculptural, very abstract. It's not immediately recognizable as hair, though we can clearly see it. So I'm really interested in this one, and I love the title.
Yeah. So this piece, this came like after I graduated from SBA, but the thought process started while in SBA. You know, being the only Black person in that space. Sometimes I say I had a Glenn Ligon moment or a Zorro, and I feel most colored when thrown against the sharp white background. I was having that experience. And like when you're in that space, you become hyper aware of audience. You become hyper aware that the people that are critiquing you, um, that are
Don't
coming to
understand.
your studio, that are coming to the shows are white.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the work started getting larger. Um, it started becoming more three-dimensional, in this kind of strategy to like take up more space. So this was kind of the in-between piece where it was like coming off the wall, but still in relationship to the white wall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, like I actually did this piece over where it's about another, what was that? Another foot taller. So it wound up being like 10 feet tall. And
Wow.
the idea where one, it's literally forcing you to look up to Black hair. Like as you experience it, you're looking up to it. And two, it's starting to evade space. And I think like works after that, I really started pushing the hair to be more sculptural. But just like I said, being aware of audience and who was consuming the work, I wanted the hair to always, or the piece, our bodies to always maintain this authority that you walk around it, you look up to it,
Mm-hmm.
it's taking up space, it's nappy as hell, all these things. So that was kind of like my passive aggressive way of dealing with.
I think it's brilliant. Oh my gosh. And getting that explanation is extremely brilliant. And I love that you even picked 10 feet. I'm an Erykah Badu fan. And so I think of her song where she's talking about I'm 10 feet tall. Love it with the afro. So, there's so many amazing connections with that. I think also that the texture of it really, I see it in the current work. So, it's almost like we're seeing how you're starting to investigate the material and how you can go abstract and how you can work with it.
And I would place like sometimes when I would get here from the barbershop, I would get little razors in the garbage bags. And like, so that piece has like razors. And, I think every Black person experiences, moment where your hair is touched without your consent. And it didn't stop, even though this was art, like no one would ever think, I mean, people, I've seen people touch paintings, but they're like kind of this, they know not to. But it was interesting, like, this here is art. Are you still gonna touch it? So I would stick razors, like,
touch at your own risk. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, with this image, now we have this move to image with printing, with paper making, and it's just, I do want to touch this. I just have to admit, I want to touch it. I want to live with it. I just, and I want to know the stories. I want to be a part of it. Yeah.
So this piece is called And Don't You Forget It. It's like kind of line my grandma always says. If you ever met my grandma, you know she always says that. She's actually the bride in that photo. And everyone to, I guess that would be the left of her, are now deceased ancestors, but her husband, my grandfather, and my great-great-grandmother, because that was my grandmother's grandmother. And then to the kind of bigger image is a great-great uncle, William. So I started getting into, I guess this was from a series where I was taking hair, making it into sheets of paper, and printing images of my ancestors and family on it, and all kind of ancestors that lived in the 1800s, early 1900s. So this was like a part of my ancestor history paper series. And it was like, I started, I guess, shifting like after I had like kind of, and I still like working sculpturally, but I kind of started using hair and to make paper as this idea of like archiving, this idea of creating history paper. And in this, I kind of see it as like a double portrait where not only is there's like this representational portrait of my ancestry, but even the sheet is another portrait and layer of ancestry. So I did like a series, and I'm working on another now, of these kind of ancestor portraits.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Is your own hair incorporated, or family hair?
No, I do have a print. My dad let me cut his hair once. So the hair from that cut, I made his hair into a sheet of paper, and my brother's hair is in that. And then I printed my grandfather's image. So it's like this 3 generation. My
Yeah.
brother hair is sewn on top of my dad's hair, and then my grandfather's image.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have another piece with me and my sister, me and my sister's hair in it. But
Mm-hmm.
this was mainly hair from the barbershop, and there's like a textural reason why barbershop hair is more ideal for paper making, because the fibers are just shorter.
That makes sense. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
kind of, I know a lot of like in paper makers would use fibers that are longer because the bind is stronger.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm taking hair and I'm pulverizing it into like a mush. I don't know if you could see my like Vitamix in the background.
I did see that. I was wondering. I was like, maybe she makes smoothies.
But yeah, I like pulverize the hair. So the shorter the strand, it's just easier to get that mush texture. And I kind of lay it out to this flat form that allows me to add these prints on top.
That's wild. Okay, so you're completely transforming it, and by doing that, a question that I think about, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about the questions of, obviously you probably wouldn't want the piece with your family's hair to enter into the market. What is when someone gives you their hair, do you guys ever have a conversation about, it going to the gallery and entering the art market? And that's a curious.
That was like kind of a big shift, like especially when I got signed to a gallery, like realizing that like, oh, I just sold Kelsey, I just sold, my brother. And then there's kind of like, especially because the work is going into like institutions or collections where people want to preserve the work. I think it's a beautiful and kind of interesting thing that there'll be whole museum departments or collectors that will now have to care for our hair.
Oh my God, I love it. That is so poetic.
Like that a museum has to learn about Black hair and learn how to care for it for as long as that institution is open. This idea that it's for, the care of ourselves. Like, you have to care for me, you have to acknowledge me, you have to preserve me, you have to archive me. And I think one of, because even with people knowing that I have a show coming up, I'm like, you're gonna be in the show. And I think people appreciate like the work because of that, they could go to a museum or go to a gallery space and we're not seeing a representation of them. They're literally seeing them. You know,
Yeah.
that Nichelle is like, that's my mom.
Wow.
Or Kelsey could look at a piece and be like, oh, that's me. You know, or Louisa could look at a piece and be like, I could tell that's my hair because of the texture and the color. You know,
Wow, that is incredible. I'm sure conservation departments are freaking out. They're like, oh my gosh, the new media, we have to figure this out. That's incredible.
it actually, I don't know if I should say this, but like my first like print, I was experimenting and I like threw like a napkin in there to like as like part of the pulp to just see, because I'm experimenting, like, is this gonna work? So yeah, the first print was like not very archival. But you know, like later on I upped my technique and
that's the life of an artist. You have to experiment with that, and conservation staff just have to learn. I do want to, because we're getting close to the Q&A, so I just want to remind folks in the audience to please drop your questions into the Q&A, and we will get to them in about 5 minutes. So I want to get through some of these as well. I always run out of time. I always need 2 hours or more. But this piece, Dada, is fascinating to me because it's also a very sharp departure. You still have hair, but it's just very, very different.
And it's funny that you called it departure, because that was my very first hair piece.
Oh, was it? Oh, wow. Okay. That's incredible. The way that it's playing with the light and the lines and the shadows.
But I made this thinking a lot about like this idea of it's forcing you to look up to Black hair like that. You can't really tell, or maybe you could by looking at like where the lights are, and the piece even goes beyond that. It's like about 20 feet high. And I was playing around with titling, you know, like I was really aware that there will be one audience that would hear Dada and think of this art movement, where it was about questioning what can be art. It was about a rejection of, you know, traditional, you know, just a period of questioning. And then I was also aware that there will be another audience that would hear Dada and know that it's referring to like Dada, which is like locked hair in Yoruba. And there's the Orisha Dada, and there's this idea that if a baby is born with locked hair, that they are Dada, that their hair is sacred, it's special, and you don't cut it. So speaking to kind of these two audiences, you know, was informing the title, informing how I thought of the work, you know, the fact that it is the tallest thing in the gallery, it is close to God, and you do have to look up to it. And, you know, just this really beautiful minimalist form, a line.
Oh my goodness. All right, you just like added 20 layers to that. And more into the work of paper, and I don't think the document needs much explanation. I think, you know, I hope that folks can quickly, you know, figure out what is going on here, but in case they're not.
Yes, so I've been working on a series called True Blue, and right now I'm looking at 2 True Blue plantations, one in Fort Mott, South Carolina. My family was enslaved on that land. And one in Pawley Island, which is now True Blue Golf Club.
Oh, wow.
So that is kind of a page from the will of one of the enslavers of True Blue, Pawley Island, where he lists his human property. The names aren't there, but you see the age and their price. So I've been looking at both of these True Blues, which were indigo and rice plantations in South Carolina, as a point of like comparison, because one history has kind of been erased through this other white space, right? It's now a golf club. like this kind of white space of leisure. So like there's, in that I like reference the architectural drawings that converted True Blue Plantation to True Blue Golf Club. And then the other True Blue, the history is kind of been erased, especially if it weren't for the work of family members like Jackie Whitmore, who's been doing a lot of work to preserve the land. But it's that history is kind of being erased through natural, through how the land is growing. You know, my family is still buried on True Blue Plantation in the cemetery that was used in slave time. And it's just overgrown by grass and trees and weeds. So like Jackie Whitmore and other family have been doing a lot of work to preserve the history, to reclaiming that history. So I've been through paper making using indigo and cotton and hair and the color blue and rice paper. So all the archives are printed on rice paper, kind of telling these two stories of these two true blues, like what the land used to be, what it is now, how the history is erased, how it's, you know, using the materials of the land, kind of, you know, this amalgamation, right? Of like, of just all this information kind of sucked into a sheet of paper.
Oh my gosh, that's wild. And I may have mixed up some of the images that you sent me. This is connected.
Yeah, so that's kind of a installation of True Blue at the Dhaka Art Summit. Before, well, I don't know why I did that for before COVID, but like I got that show in before
you
COVID.
Got it up.
Like it was in February.
That's awesome. I mean, hey, that's a huge accomplishment.
And like Arab lines were starting to back out. I'm like, I'm going.
Yeah.
Kind of sidetrack. But yeah, no, that was an installation of True Blue at the Dhaka Art Summit. And you could kind of see, and I have like,
I think you sent me a couple of close-ups, but yeah.
They're in my studio. I mean, like, so
why not?
Some of these archives start in like this form where you see like True Blue Plantation. I have a lovely assistant. You know, the different names and the text. So they start off, and I make these sheets out of cotton, and then they're adhered to the hair paper. Yeah. Thank you, Kelsey.
That's awesome. Now, you know, thinking about indigo, was your family, did your family have a history with being indigo farmers and producers?
Well, they were enslaved on the indigo plantation. True was an indigo plantation. So you see a lot with indigo plantations on the lowland, they would produce rice. And then on the highlands, they would produce indigo. So True Blue produced like an average of like 700,000 pounds of rice per year, all cultivated through human slave labor. And then, you know, when they weren't working with the rice, they would work in indigo. So, you know, I was reading about kind of just different histories of how we as African people have used the land for our liberation, like when you think of the Haitian Revolution, or how the land has been used as a form of oppression against us. And I started thinking a lot about my relationship to this land. And it was really interesting, one, to know, well, it's not interesting, like, you know, it's common, you know, my history started on this plantation, but also that my relationship to the color blue, you know, as an artist, was one of violence and enslavement of my ancestors. So that's why, like, blue, you know, a lot of the work before this series, as you saw, like the color is whatever color the hair was. So this is kind of the first time in my practice where another color is being added to the hair. And in this case, it's blue as it references this history.
You know, that's incredible. I don't know where I was reading or watching a documentary, but you know, I think it would be interesting to, I don't know if you've looked into the history of it, but I have somewhere very recently read that a lot of the enslaved Africans that were brought to work on indigo plantations actually came from Nigeria, because Nigeria had such this long, deep history of working in indigo. So, you know.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because and if COVID didn't happen, I was planning on going back to Nigeria to learn the dairy process of using indigo. But exactly, through doing research, I was learning that I'll just give a quick story. Like I had a show in London, and there was the price of $2,000 per person, per enslaved person listed on this will, and some woman was like, $2,000 is a lot, which, like, you know, but in the context of that, the Africans that knew how to use indigo because of their long history and culture with that dye and that process, they were sold at a premium because they could transfer that knowledge and that history from those countries like Sierra Leone and Nigeria and Senegal and, you know, what is known as like the Rice Coast countries, and transfer that to the plantations in the Carolinas and Georgia. And I think it's really important to like note that, because if you have a system that says we're not human, we have no history, we have no culture, then how can you depend on their history, their knowledge, their culture to create your empire? So I've been, you know, more and more kind of not just using the indigo, but trying to be more intentional about the techniques that I'm bringing into the sheets. So like, is it a dere? Is it chapeau? You know, so that this history and this kind of, I almost like to think of it as like I'm tapping into memory. But you know, this history that we have with this material is present, you know, kind of, you know, creating my own triangle.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I can, you know, I can already envision all the places you can go with that, because, oh my gosh, it's deep when you're thinking about American history. I'm just trying to see if anyone has any questions, and before I jump in to any more. And I invite folks, we still have a few minutes if you want to, we definitely can. But I also, you know, wanted to also spend a few minutes to find out what you have coming up next. I know things are uncertain right now as you know, museums and galleries are not yet opened, or slowly opening in some cases. But yeah, what's next for you, or what do you want to manifest, maybe?
Yeah. Well, I guess I feel really blessed that I still have a show that I'm working on. You know, and even me, you know, I was affected. A lot of shows of mine were canceled, but I do have a solo show. My first New York solo show in New York will be on September, as the gates go. Will be on September 12th at Claire Oliver Gallery in Harlem. Yes, so I've been making a lot of new work that is kind of rooted in this series that I've been working, you know, the True Blue series. So, but it'll be a lot of new pieces. So outside of the grid, which I've been getting a lot of attention for, I'm doing more, like there's some to the side of me I did. You know, there'll be large works and really small kind of intimate works. I'm gonna have a sound piece.
Oh, I love it.
The work that I did before here was a sound installation. So I feel like I'm just, getting back.
Bringing it all together. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. And then I'll be exhibiting at 154 online.
Woo, that's awesome. That is a huge achievement.
Yeah.
I do have a question that just came in from Namita asking, or first of all, saying that you have beautiful work. How do you put the hair on the surfaces and how long does it take?
Yeah, so like the high top piece, it is on canvas, and that's sewn and attached through like like a gel medium. But a lot of the works that you see are not attached to anything. So the paper is literally cotton and hair made into a pulp, and then using the traditional couching paper making technique, the pulp is made into a thin sheet, and then that sheet is dyed, and then on top of the dye are the images. So it is, and even like the Ancestor series, like it is hair. It's not attached to anything.
It's just part of it.
Yeah, like I have this like little bowl thing I made. This is hair. And it was like, I wanted to make something three-dimensional and sculptural. Like, how do I make black hair sculptural without an armature, without being attached? Like that answer. So I'll be making more of these. I call them like vessels. But yeah, the hair is sewn or made into pulps or shaped into sculpture. It's just hair.
That's incredible. I have another question in here where someone, and I'm assuming because they may want to do this, it's an anonymous attendee, also wants to know how can one go about donating hair? And I'm assuming they may want to be part of it, of your work.
Yeah, so I think she's just helping me get it out, but that's a good friend, and she's donated hair. Actually, her hair is on the wall, but you could my Instagram, like Adebooms, Adebooms. A lot of people will reach out to me through Instagram. My email is my first full name, studio@gmail, or like my website. I recently had a woman, Monica, who works at Curls All Out. And her salon, she works at a black hair salon, and they just had so much hair and they felt guilty about throwing it out. So now she contacted me, and that huge garbage bag is all from her salon. That's one place.
Wow.
So now
wow.
their salon, I like to think, is like I'm in partnership with. So yeah, just reaching out to me in all the different ways that I exist online.
I love how you enter into partnerships with the people and the salons. I think, there's just something about that just seems very, there's a gratitude, there's a mutual respect for each other in that process.
And it's also like this reality that like there would be no work without my community. Like literally, like there's times where, like even right now, like I have work to make, but nothing could happen if I don't have the hair through donations or the barbershops. So even the pace or the amount of work or what I could produce is all dependent on,
exactly.
My community, Black people, which I love, like that structure of how the work comes to be.
And on that note, I thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, for opening up your studio for us and telling us so much.
Like a little.
Oh my gosh, we could have really just spent all day walking around your studio.
And I have things in the hall. I'm like, every studio I've had, I've like spilled out of my studio. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so, so much. This has been amazing, and I cannot wait to see what you do next. Yes, we do have so many people on Facebook. Yay. Hey, everybody. Sorry we couldn't directly interact with you, but please make sure that you follow Adebunmi on Instagram and on Facebook. Also check Claire Oliver's gallery. And Claire Oliver, thank you so much for sponsoring and or co-sponsoring this with us. Thanks to Westridge Foundation, and thank you, Adebunmi.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Have a beautiful rest of your day.
You too.
Bye, everyone. See you next time.